Let's move on to the Brisbane story, which has dominated the headlines over the last 72 hours. They're 0-3. There's been some type of off-field incident in the off-season, not in Vegas, it must be said. More on that in a moment. And plenty of reaction, including how it got into the public arena. You had some comments on this last night on Footy Furnace. The Lions responded today, and we'll hear from Lee Matthews as well.
I'm not critical of a journalist who decides to go with the story when others aren't, but I will say that I wouldn't go with a story unless I was categorically sure that it was affecting on-field performance. The Lions are denying it, and no one's saying it has, and it's just filtering around in the atmosphere. So until someone says that, I don't think it's a footy story, and I think it's quite tabloid, and I think it's gossipy.
But now I feel the need to speak on behalf of the club and in support of our players when their partners and families were brought into this following some poor, insensitive and factually incorrect media reporting. I want to confirm that there was no crisis meetings over the weekend. I called our co-captains to confirm that there was no issues within the playing group, and both of them assured me that there weren't.
Well, it's a little bit difficult for me because I only found out about this when you mentioned it 10 minutes ago, Sam, so it's not something I was aware of as a board member at the Lions. Whatever's transpired is complete news to me. But the principle of the thing, if there's friction between players or partners of players behind the scenes, that's not a good thing.
Right. Well, a couple of things there to unpack, and we'll get to Caro in a moment. Firstly, Lee Matthews should have been told. No excuses on the board, football, identity of his nature, and there's no reason he should have been.
Why should he have been told? If we accept at face value that this was dealt with among the playing group at the time, back in November at the time of the trip. I mean, I take issue with Tom criticising a story for being tabloid. I'm sorry, Tom, but that's pretty laughable.
Yeah, but
we're in the business of tabloid journalism.
Yeah, it's not a footy story, though, is my point.
I disagree with you. It's when they're 0-3. The question...
They were 0-2 at the time it was reported.
Well, when you're 0-2, you had a bad start. The question inevitably moves to why and how.
No, 0-3.
And what are the factors? Like if they're 3-0, wrongly, but if rightly or wrongly, 3-0, this is not a story. But they're not winning. A lot of the players on that trip are among those out of form. It strikes at the heart of the discussion.
It harked back to... I don't like to use the term, the St Kilda schoolgirl story. And remember that year that all that stuff came out about St Kilda and weird pictures from off-season trips, and that ended up, almost blowing the club up at the time for a variety of reasons. There were a lot of red herrings, but there were some serious issues going on at that club, and it went all the way up to Nick Riewoldt for a while. Not that he'd done anything untoward. This had that potential, I imagine, according to Sam McClure, when he broke the story. Now, there was obviously some disgruntlement perhaps among some players, annoyed at one player for being a bit lax with his social media.
But that was done before Christmas, Caro.
That's
it.
But stuff happens on end-of-season trips.
The Adelaide camp didn't become an issue.
I'm fully aware the Adelaide camp took time, but there were issues consistently throughout the year, and we reported on those issues throughout the year.
Sam McClure started his story by saying Brisbane deny that this is an issue. Yeah. We think it's worth airing. Now, say whether he's right or wrong to report it, I don't criticise him for reporting it. No. Yes, it's gossipy. I think he was pretty respectful. He didn't name any of the players.
Absolutely understand
Didn't name any of their partners. Yeah. It was wrong. I think it was reported elsewhere about the crisis meeting. Yeah. Vegas was incorrect. The photos were mainly taken in Nashville. The photos were pretty funny, I thought. They were just of a normal...
Well, the photos that have been publicised were normal. There was nothing untoward.
Yeah. They were
conjecture, though. I know, but they were reported as...
You've got every footy journalist in the country chasing whether there's any divide in any section of the playing group, and no one has been able to say there was. Until that's the case, it's just a personal...
So are there going to be ramifications?
The Lions would not be the best place to know whether there's...
I'm not talking about the club. I'm talking about people inside the club.
Tom, tell us about the ramifications, though, because there are some very angry people at Brisbane.
There are some angry people at Brisbane, not just with 3AW, but also with the Herald Sun. So my understanding tonight is that the Brisbane Lions are considering a boycott of not just the Herald Sun but also 3AW for an indefinite period of time for the Herald Sun's reporting and 3AW. So they're angry. The club are more angry at the Herald Sun, the players are more angry at 3AW, and that's where it's at tonight.
That would be an overreaction.
You've seen a few boycotts in your time. Do they ever work?
I don't think Damien Hardwick still talks to 3AW.
He boycotted you, Caro.
9 or the A. Yeah. He's boycotting the entire media industry.
I don't think there's a big
cure
people to interview the Lions. Fair you go. But
they'll weigh that up over the next 48 hours.
They've got off-field problems. North Melbourne, I hate to sound disrespectful, North comes at a good time for them because their tools are off. You've been critical of whether you think the tools can get it done at the business end. Danaher perhaps proved you wrong towards the end of last year, almost. However, this was Chris Fagan's comments on their forwards at the moment and the tools.
Selection-wise, tonight you had 3 tall forwards, right? So that's a change. But do you think generally Well, we had three tools. We had 3 tools in the first game, and we had 3 tools tonight. Yeah.
I'm just like, how confident are you that the footy you're trying to play is going to work? Like, or is it a chance? Do you need to overhaul something? Do you think?
Well, they're the players that we've got, you know.
Well, you can make a statement, and I thought, so this is Eric Hipwood, and I'm conscious of the fact that every time they lose, we can be critical of Eric, but that the numbers just don't stack up for him now, unless he does something extraordinary defensively, and that's what Chris Fagan will say, because I've argued with Chris about this before when I was critical of Eric last year, and he's very defensive of him, but he made a statement last year when he dropped Gunston and Rich, and I thought that was a big one. I think at times he's too nice. There's the senior players or the core group of players whose form has significantly dropped off, and Eric.
And they're all the flair players.
Well, and Eric Hipwood plays.
Does he make the statement this week?
I think he has to, Karen. Like, he had a poor final series. He plays one good game every 8. I know he's on a big contract, and I know it's difficult for the club who have invested so heavily in him, mistakenly, to drop him, and that would signal the mistake that they've made with that contract. But you sometimes have to reward players at selection with getting a game, and those that aren't performing with losing their place.
They haven't tried him behind the ball before, or on a wing, or anything like that. They'll wing a little bit, but
yeah. Well, even
even
the Jeremy Cameron role, actually, like, get him up and get him involved in the game, play him on the wing for a bit. Cameron played on Adelaide for the first 20 minutes on the wing, so you could do a little bit of that, but he's just not physical and not competitive enough.
Of all the people to beat them in the first quarter, Bobby Hill too. Like, you would have thought going into that game, okay, then there's no way they're going to give Bobby Hill any room, any space at all, given the grand final.
Well, their Smalls did some damage, and Elliott kicked 4, Hill kicked 3, McCreary was good, and that had been a struggle for Collingwood in the first 3 weeks. But what it was for the Pies was their pressure, and I just thought it was enormous. So they lay 85 tackles on the night. This is the difference. So don't tell me it's not attitude, and we discussed all about the premiership hangover and all of that. If you watch him here, and we'll play it again, he says, our pressure is back. That's my lip reading of that. Our pressure is back. And he was on the bench and he was animated when he hadn't been. So that's the difference, the pressure there. If they can continue to maintain that and the intensity and the motivation to do the hard stuff, then they're going to get similar results. So, I mean, it was a big win for Collingwood, that goes without saying, but it was off the back of their pressure.